Yeah, it's kind of a creepy place, you know, because there's no light at all.
A lot of experiments out there.
Plutonium, nuclear weapon,
Nuclear destruction. They're just balls of light. There's a ghost there.
Up, everyone. Happy New Year from Beyond the Strange. Broadcasting from the Napa Valley wine country just outside the mystical Sonoma Mountains. Just Beyond the Strange, the radio program for you, the listener. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is Sunday, January. God, I got to get out of that mentality. I'm still in 2017. It's 2018. It's January 7th, 2018 to be exact. And got a good show for you guys tonight, man. It's something I've been looking forward to for quite a while. We got Gary Wayne with us tonight, and we are going to be discussing so many things based on the Nephilim and Genesis 6 and all kinds of different things. It's going to be an amazing show tonight. I'm going to bring in Mark Eddy here in a bit. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to be bringing in Gary on in just a few minutes. But I just want to thank everyone for sending me all the well wishes. As you could tell, I'm been under the weather quite a few days now. It's been more like 2 weeks, but it really smacked me hard right after the first of the new year, and I have no idea why. It just, man, I mean, there's people left and right just dropping like flies, man. They're so sick. It's ridiculous. I don't know what this bug is, but it's definitely engineered, man. I'll tell you why I believe that, because it's almost like you feel the effects of one bug, it starts to go away. Then you start feeling the effects of another bug, and then it starts going away. Then the effects of the last bug start coming back, but not as bad, and then so on and so on. It's just really ridiculous, man. And anyways, yeah, thank you, Kat, and everybody. Like I said, I really appreciate all you guys sending me well wishes and telling me to get better and stuff. And I've been off of social media for a little while, and I'm probably going to be off social media for a little bit longer so I can rest up some more. But yeah, I needed to get my strength for tonight, and for all those who don't know, we do Project Compass on Monday nights, Mark, Eddy, and I. And so yeah, and thanks, Nick, the champ out in Twitterverse, along with God of Thunder. Got Dennis and Yeg and Kat, Snark, all you guys in the Spreaker chat. Thanks for being here tonight. Oh, Gigi's here. Right on. Yo-ho. Yo-hoy, Gigi. Thanks for being here. But anyways, we're going to get the show started. And once again, thank you all for asking me to get better and sending your good vibes and healing and light and everything, and greatly appreciate that. All right, so the call-in number for tonight's show is 1-415-891-9083. Again, the call-in number for the show tonight is 1-415-891-9083. And that's when the phone lines are open. Typically, it's after the first hour of the show, and we'll let you know when those lines are open. And remember, this is a live show broadcasting from BeyondTheStrange.com, KTLK, The Fringe FM, TalkStream Live, and TuneIn Radio, all under The Fringe FM. You can always like or friend the show. All the links to social media are at beyondthestrange.com. For those of you in the Twitterverse, we are at Strange Days 2015, and we do trend with the hashtag Beyond the Strange. Archives for the show are at Beyond the Strange YouTube channel. If you're listening on iTunes, give us a nice review if you enjoy the program. Great reviews always help the show. Beyond the Strange is on Stitcher and soon to be on Google Play as well. So keep checking the website for those updates. And also, if you want to donate to the show, which we greatly appreciate, everything helps. But while supplies last, anything over $20, a one-time donation of $20 or more will get you a BTS t-shirt and a book from the BTS library. And like I said it before, I'll say it again. We don't give away janky books. We got some really good stuff. And all you got to do is go to the website, go to the donate button, put in your information, send me an email to dave@beyondthestrange.com. Let me know the t-shirt size and your interest in books and topics and stuff, and we'll see what we can get going there for you. But it's a great way to help the show. It's a great way to continue the show going. And like I said, all your donations are greatly appreciated. And we just really love you for all that. Okay? So thank you once again for doing that and being active and part of the show. Let me bring in my good buddy and yours, Mr. Mark Eddy. Mark, thank you for joining me tonight.
Yeah, well, it's time for me to say thank you again for thinking I know something about tonight's topic and let me speak about it.
I greatly appreciate it, man. And no, I know that you and Gary go back a bit, so that's cool. And it's going to be...
he's a good guy. Yeah, I'm looking very informative guy. It's going to be a really fun 2 hours. I hope Gary can speak over the parrot screaming.
I hope I can too. I can barely talk right now, so. But anyways, it's going to be great, and everyone's looking forward to it, and as am I. And we're going to get Gary on here in a second, so I'm going to go ahead and just start doing the old bio, and we're going to get Gary on the line. Gary Wayne is a scholar of many religions, sacred texts. He has brought a lifetime of research to his recent publications of the Genesis 6 conspiracy, how secret societies and the descendants of giants plan to enslave humankind, Who are the Nephilim? How have they survived, and what is their legacy? Not a Twilight Zone fantasy. This is real biblical prophecy. Gary is with us for 2 hours to trace their ancient history up to today. So, everyone, help me welcome for the first time at Beyond the Strange, Mr. Gary Wayne. Gary, how are you?
I am very good tonight, and so happy to be with you, and very much looking forward to our discussion tonight.
As am I, sir. And we have Mark with us. I was just going to say, Mark and Gary, you guys probably talked already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good evening.
Yeah. Hi, Gary. Just everyone just kick back and absorb all of Gary's information over the next couple hours. We'll start seeing IQ points going up.
Nice.
It's gonna be a good one. Yeah. Dave, do you want to start off, or I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. This is, like I said again. This is the first time we've had Gary on the show, and we greatly appreciate that. And so, yeah, I'll just for our audience, Gary, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Well, I've done over 30 years of research, in terms of preparing to write this book and into biblical prophecy, and add a few more years on to finish writing the book and getting it published. And so, my background is not from a theological perspective. I'm one of those contrarians, like I like to advertise, and I like to verify things for myself. So all of the research that I did was I came at it without using other people's research in the genre, or what people said it said about the Bible, or what people said it said about secret societies. I wanted to learn for myself. So I'm a self-taught person on this subject, and I think I've sort of written a narrative that connects most of the dots, even though you can't talk about everything in one book. I talk about a lot of things that connect the dots from the beginning of the secret societies, the mystical religions, the giants before the flood, to what's gone on through history and what is happening today and what they're planning to do in the future. So it's a very well annotated book in terms of the research. So my background has nothing to do with the subject. I did this while I was still working. That had nothing to do with the subject, and I did it all in my spare time. That's excellent. And when we talk about the subject, we are definitely talking about the Nephilim and giants, the watchers, if you will, of Genesis. We are, and that's sort of the base sort of starting point with it. Although it ventures into so many avenues and aspects as you sort of go down the rabbit holes, and they seem to be endless at times. But what you learn is everything is connected. But yes, I take things right back to the beginning in Genesis, what's recorded in Genesis 6, and some of the other fairly odd and seemingly at times out of place verses that are in Genesis, and provide some meaning to them. But what I also do is I bring in accounts from all around the world. So whether or not it's from the Vedas, their mythology, their religion, whether it's from the Ksha Maya, again out of the Popol Vuh, or their legends, or the Greek history and legends, or the Gnostic Gospels, all pull in all of those sources to build that base coming out of Genesis and what happens after the flood, and then carry that forward using historical records and other sources to bring out the whole sort of chain of events that takes place. So yes, it begins with Genesis 6, and it talks about the creation of the giants, and then it moves forward from there. And I like to call it it's following the sort of the bloodlines of the House of Dragons. So it's one of those things that's just loaded with allegories, but it does begin with the giants in Genesis 6 and the creation of the secret societies, at that time as well. When you say the House of Dragons, Gary, is that in reference to the Dracos, or what we in the paranormal community may call reptilians? Well, sure, because it may be in a slightly different manner than what most people in the alien mythos will talk about in terms of the reptilians, but certainly something similar, just as you have this being in the Garden of Eden, which is separate from these other creatures that are, descended from the seraphim angels. And I'm talking about the serpent in Eden as being something that was an intelligent being. That was as big as a camel, according to the Gnostic Gospels. It could do all of the work required that humans would do for planting and farming, and it was, considered a kingly sort of beast of that time. And before it has its voice and its intelligence and its legs and its wings taken away, it's very much this draconian type of being, understanding that dragon, serpent, and crocodile in ancient mythology all goes back to the same sort of meaning. And so some of these beings with these serpents probably had wings. So you would have an animal with wings that looks like a serpent, which is a dragon. Now, if you look at a seraphim angel, that is, as you define that back in its Hebrew meanings, is a high-ranking angel that has the face of a snake. So it is this flying, godlike being much like the feathered serpent that would be in Central America, that produces offspring that produces the Nephilim, who look just like them, only they don't have wings. They're just these giants, but they have the face of a snake at that time. So when you get into this whole ideology of reptilians, there is definitely a connection there that sort of, again, links into another mythos. That's the alien mythos that you mentioned. But I wanted to mention the word watcher that's in there, that comes out of the first book of Enoch, and link in the word drakon or drakonta that comes out of Greek, the Greek language, and that means to watch, right? Just as the Egyptian netter gods are the ones who watch, just as the Urshu gods of prehistory were the watchers and the intermediaries, and just as First Enoch talks about these seraphim angels as watchers. So this whole sort of dragon, serpent, god, giant imagery that goes and mixes in with the kingships around the world, because the Nephilim, created from this union of gods or fallen angels and human females, usurps the kingships around the world and use that as the divine right to rule, because they're the offspring of the gods.
Oh, awesome. Mark, did you want to ask Gary anything right now?
Oh yeah. Gary, since we're getting started in the early stages of prehistory, what are some of the characteristics of the Nephilim rule on the Earth?
You're asking what their role was in early prehistory?
Like when they ruled the Earth.
Right. Yeah.
Like they were usually in power positions, correct?
Yeah. So they arrive in the Bible in about the 6th generation, the generation of Jared. Noah is also born in that period as well, and thereafter. And so it's well into prehistory that these demigods and these giants are produced. But because of their superior size, and they're just not 7 feet tall, they're not 8 feet tall, but these are monstrous beings. And so, some people think that they're as big as 20 to 40 feet in the first generation. Some people like to maybe mistranslate or misapply 300 ells or 300 cubits as the other translation goes out of Enoch, to translate them to be over 400 feet or even bigger than that. But the standard sort of understanding is that they were 20 to 40 feet. In the Bible, we get Goliath, if you're taking him at a common cubit, he's going to be just around 10 feet. If you use a royal cubit, which all of the measurements for the buildings and the royal kings were used, that would put him closer to 11 feet. Og would have been using the same sort of standard, probably somewhere around 14 to 15 feet, with his bed being 15 to 16 feet long and made of iron, because wood would have collapsed underneath it. So they had the ability to quickly take power just because of their extraordinary size. And so they usurped the kingships both before the flood and after the flood. And what they're doing in the 6th generation, which is important to understand, is they're now partnering with the other lineage in Genesis called the Cainite line. And what's going on in the Cainite line is that Cain passes on the 7 sacred sciences he learns in Eden according to the secret societies, and teaches Enoch, who develops these 7 sacred sciences into tremendous knowledge and understanding of the sciences and a development of the application thereof, and passes it down through his progeny. And by the time of Lamech, which is again of the lineage of Cain as opposed to the same name of Lamech in the lineage of Seth, this is the Cain line I'm talking about, there's a revitalization of these sciences, and they create the secret societies. And that's where Freemasonry takes their history back to, according to Albert Mackey and the Legends of Enoch and the Legends of the Craft and all of the works that he has assembled out of their Polychronicon and prehistory, and taking Enoch, Cain, Tubal-Cain as examples of some of their greatest patriarchs. So Enoch also develops, as he's developing these sciences, he develops the mystical religion. So you have the mystical religions, that is the sun-worshipping religion, also known as the bull cult, that's being developed before the flood. That's developing these sciences to create some of the great monuments to worship their gods in prehistory. The descendants of Cain, and they're going to now partner with these giants that are created by the fallen angels in Genesis 6. And they are going to usurp the world, and they're going to enslave their balance of humankind. And the violence and the corruption that this partnership brings about is going to totally corrupt the antediluvian world. And you can see this organizational structure that goes right throughout mythology, right around the world. And typically, and I think the Ring Lords would be a good one, or the Lords of the Ring, as people would know, Tolkien bringing this antediluvian history to life with some artistic license and using more of the Norse mythology. But you have this ring of lords. This is a round table, as in King Arthur, of kings that are ruling the antediluvian world of different species and giants. And so heavily weighted, obviously, by the Anunnaki, as they're called in Sumerian mythology, or the Titans in Greek mythology, that are the kings of the ring. And alongside them, and you see the imagery as well, as with the wizards. The wizards represent the mystical religion I was talking about. And so this is that organizational structure that you have, and this is the same organizational structure that crosses the flood, as well as you have the mystery schools and the secret societies that are developed to advance certain aspects of this technology and knowledge. And Freemasonry takes their name from the fifth science of geometry that they actually call within the craft masonry. And so they take credit for the building of all of these ancient antediluvian monuments and buildings, including the pyramids. I'm not saying this is what they're saying, that were actually built from the knowledge that Enoch had developed and passed on.
That is awesome. I mean, I love getting into this stuff, Gary. It's great. For those of you who are in the Spreaker chat or even in Facebook or Twitter, remember to put your questions in caps for Gary, so I can see those a lot more clearly, and then I can get those questions to Gary, and then he can answer them for you. And we got about 5 minutes before we get to our first break, Gary. I just wanted to bring that up real quick. When you brought up the wizards, now is it safe to say that these are like King Arthur type wizards as well, like Modred or Merlin?
Yes, Merlin is actually a title for a priest of the sciences and the arts. So the arts and the sciences is actually what develops the magic, and the magic that's associated with wizards that has been part of that kind of characterization of it is derived from the word magi, right? Magi, magic, pretty easy connection there. And the Magi were part of the Mesopotamian priesthood after Babel. And after Babel, you have Nimrod going to Mesopotamia and reestablishing what he had done at Babel with the seven sciences and his mystical religion. Hermes partners with Ham, goes to Egypt and reestablishes that religion. So all of this is connected back, and I'm probably going down a rabbit trail here, so I'll shorten it off and come back. Is that according to the Masons, Hermes discovers the two pillars of Lamech, whom I just discovered, which has parts of the knowledge that is collected in the antediluvian epoch. And it also has directions to where his 9 vaults of 36,525 books of knowledge, according to Masonic records, other ones are less in number, that are buried under the pyramid. And he brings this knowledge and religion back to Nimrod, and he partners with Nimrod at Babel and manifests the sciences again, and they start building Babel City and Babel Tower from this knowledge, and he initiates 1,000 people into the mysteries. And we get a hint of this knowledge in the biblical account in Genesis, where God is saying something to, paraphrasing, speaking as one language, as one people, and working together. Nothing they try to do will be prevented from them doing. So we get a hint of that, and then God disperses the languages, and that's why you have Nimrod going to Mesopotamia, and you've got Hermes and Ham going to Egypt. This is the knowledge that comes across the flood. And so all of this understanding, as we come through history and prehistory and mythology, even up to the same time, when they're referring to the wizards, these are the priests of the mystical religion.
Right.
It's just been added with more sort of flair, but Merlin would be the typical archetypical description of one of those priests. And if you can imagine, let's say, Moses or somebody else in the court of Pharaoh, and they're doing these magical tricks, well, these priests would have been wearing types of caps and things, just as the kings wore caps to cover their elongated skulls. But that's another rabbit hole in itself.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Mark, we got about 2 minutes before the break. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah. How did the Nephilim survive the flood? I think that's intriguing. Because you do bring that up in your book.
Yeah, there's depending on which perspective you want to come at that from. It's not something I can answer in 2 minutes, but I'd love to answer that in full after the flood.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit of a long answer to give it justice.
Okay. Well, okay. Since we're down to 90 seconds or so, in like 700-800 pages in your book, you do cover a little bit of everything. You do a thorough job too. We've already touched on the King Arthur, the Grail legends. We'll be getting more into Atlantis, the Merovingian kings. Yeah. I mean, you're giving us a whirlwind tour of our history, world history. It's a fascinating book.
Yeah, and essentially following the bloodlines as well. So it's a 6,000-year connect the dots investigation, as I said earlier, into the House of Dragon, of how, what they did in the flood, how they crossed the flood, and how they affected our history, and how they continue to affect us today. I put out a post earlier today on Facebook called, about the Knights of the Seraphim Order of the Swedish Kings, and link that back, the double cross, back to the Templars and all of the different types of kings and the different societies going back into prehistory, because it's about the bloodlines, right? And these bloodlines are still active today.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and we'll stop here, guys, and then we'll pick it up on the flip side. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. You are with us, and Gary Wayne and Mark Eddy. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Back our guest tonight, Mr. Gary Wayne. Gary, thank you for being on the show with us tonight.
Well, so happy to be back here. Hopefully what we're talking about is starting to catch the attention of the audience, because I know I just get so excited every time I talk about it.
Oh, yes, sir, indeed. And Mark, thank you also for joining us tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, I'm looking forward to the next 90 minutes.
And I just want to remind everyone, I do see your questions, and I'm going to get to them accordingly as much as possible. And one of the first questions, Gary, and I know we said we're going to get back to what we're talking about before, but before that, I do want to get to some of these questions. God of Thunder in Twitter would like to ask, if Adam and Eve were banished from Eden, how could Cain have learned the skills there?
So according to Masonic legends, is Adam was taught the 7 sacred sciences while still in Eden. And so this is pure knowledge, and it's all being used for good. After Eden, he has Cain, Abel, and Seth. And of course, Abel is murdered by Cain. But in the meantime, before Seth is born, Adam is providing this information and mentoring Cain and Abel until he dies. And then afterwards, he's going to mentor Seth. So with the two lineages thereof, you have the Cain line and the Seth line. The Seth line is going to continue to apply the knowledge, but in ways of good. And astronomy becomes their main focus because they're an agrarian people, as they're described in Eden. Cain, though, never really forgives God for his banishment and punishment, and starts to go more the way of evil, and they start to pervert the knowledge. And by the time he has Enoch, they have two and more working in the perversion of the sciences, and they're going to lead people away from God. They're going to not give God credit for anything. And they're going to use this knowledge to honor their pantheon of gods that they are accepting, which the person who's asking the question, God of Thunder, would recognize as the fallen angels, or the seven gods that run most of the antediluvian civilizations that are mentioned throughout religions and mythology around the world.
Now, Donnie in Facebook, he made a comment, and he wanted to know, were the Magi also known as scientists?
The Magi? Yeah, they were the scientists, right? And they were developing it. And, just as you have coming down through around the year 1600, you have in 1660 the establishment of the Royal Society. Well, these were the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists, as they like to call themselves. And it was created by Rosicrucians and Freemasons. So, yes, they were developing the sciences. And in sometimes in good ways. It's not the knowledge that is evil. It's the application of the knowledge. Is it being applied for good, or is it being applied for evil?
Very true, very true. We also have some questions in the Spreaker chat, and Catalina would like to know, what does Gary think the real reason Cain slew Abel and was Seth's third son?
Well, yes, I think Seth was definitely the third son, and I know there's some Gnostic accounts, and I'm familiar with Amaka Seth, that a lot of the Gnostics like to take their ancestral heritage back, but this is a different being and a different creation than the Seth in the Bible. Cain is definitely another son of Adam. I understand there's a lot of Kabbalism and Gnostic gospels out there that would suggest, and even the Targum has annotations in it, which is the verbal sort of things that the rabbis worked with the Old Testament. In terms of teaching it, would mention that Cain might have been a son of Satan or other angels, depending on which source you're going to use on that. But the reason that Cain, murders Abel is not given to us in a simple sort of way. There's no clear sort of motive other than Cain becomes very, very jealous because God is going to honor Abel for giving him the first fruits of everything. And in Cain's sacrifice, he doesn't provide the first fruits. He just gives them some of it. And in God's laws, just as it was taught in the ancient nation of Israel, is that you have to provide the first fruits, whether it's of animals or of the plants as the sacrifice. And so that's why, in my conclusion from reading the Bible, that's why it was rejected. And so, therefore, if you understand how blessings work in the Bible, that means you're going to get significant things coming forward and rights and inheritance that go on to your progeny. So if Cain doesn't receive the initial blessings in the way that he would have wanted to, he knows what the implication of that is. And for an example of that, we would look to Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac, and the blessings and the promises in the covenant made after the flood that are going to be set aside and implemented for their descendants. So the blessings is a very important part of this whole understanding of why Cain goes sideways. Instead of just sort of asking forgiveness and going forward the next time, presenting the first fruits, and not continuing to do evil and using anger as his method of resolving his issues, things could have been differently, but they weren't. But that's, again, the only motives that I can dig out of Genesis to apply to the motive of Cain murdering Abel.
I gotcha. And one last follow-up question from Catalina as well. Do you feel that Cain might have had more of a reptilian brain than what we so-called have, that reptilian side in every human?
Yeah, no, not unless he was actually the son of Cain or some of the seraphim angels, as some of the other accounts would have. No, I don't think so. I just think that, once Adam and Eve leave Eden, and after they've eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they know both sides of the coin, right? And now they're going to participate and have to weigh things out in the physical world, which is corrupted, and they're going to have to find their own way, and not everybody's going to find their own way. People are going to be corrupted by the world, and I think that's what happens with Cain. And I would also suggest that I think this happens even with the seraphim angels, the watchers, who are the governors of the antediluvian epoch, as they take on their worldly sort of shape or body, and they become corrupted and impassioned because they think the women are beautiful, and they have sex with any one of them that they please, and they produce, a violation against the laws of creation. They're putting the immortal angelic spirit into the physical world, into a physical body, and creating these demigods that have an immortal spirit. And so we also hear in other religions of the seraphims reacting from how the world seems to influence them as well. So the physical world will affect everybody that's in this world, and the only one who has overcome it has been one, and that would be Jesus.
I have a side question to about what you just said. It's something that I've always wondered with, the sons of God laying with the daughters of men. And I was always under the impression that any angel didn't have the same anatomy as humans. So therefore, how could they even reproduce with a human, or amongst themselves for that matter?
Well, I think that's a very good question. And in the pantheons around the world, you actually have gods mating with gods to produce the lower gods, right? So let's say you take the Greek mythology, you have the primordial gods, like Kronos and Gaius, and they're going to produce through their offspring other gods like Zeus and Poseidon, right? The second tier gods of Olympus. And those are the lower gods. And so if we understand these gods as angels and that they come from another dimension, these are spiritual beings. And so a lot of people will say, well, how does a spiritual being then have the ability to take a physical form and have sex and pass this DNA on to human females and create these giants? And a lot of people will also point to Matthew and say marriage is not permitted in heaven, which is why this was such a great violation of the laws of creation in the physical world. So bringing that to sort of a conclusion, then we get all sorts of descriptions of angels in the Bible in different forms. Some of them are just like men, who people like Abraham don't even distinguish as being different from humans. Some that look like humans, but they're angels. Some that are dragon-like beings, as Satan is described in Revelation. Some are giant beings. Some are shining beings. And there's different orders of angels. And so we have all these different sort of descriptions of angels in sort of that physical understanding coming out of the Bible. So what's that telling us is that they somehow have the ability to take on a physical form in this world. And if we look at Jude 1:6, where these angels left their habitation goes back to a word in Greek, in the original Greek, called oikotering, which means a dwelling place for the spirit. So they left the dwelling place for their spirit in heaven, and they come into the physical world. And I think they need to have a physical being to put their spirit into, to interact with the world. So somehow they're able to take this form, and somehow they're able to take any sex that they want, male or female. And this is not something that we see written sort of matter-of-factly out of the Bible. We have to put that information together, but we do understand that they did go to human females, and they did have sex with human females, and they did produce the giants. So they obviously have the ability to take a human form. And I think that is something that they possess, just as other religions and the Kabbalah and other accounts all say that they have this changeling, shape-shifting ability in this world, and they can take any shape, form, or sex that they want.
Okay, very good. Mark, before the break, you were asking Gary about how did the Nephilim survive the flood? Is that correct?
Right, and we have like 15 minutes for the answer. We only had 2. So, Gary, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah,
or...
I will, and I won't take 15 minutes with it, but
I have a lot of questions. Take as long as you want, but if you save some time, I have a lot more questions. So does the chat room. So we're just enjoying.
We got another full hour after this. Don't worry.
Yeah, we got lots of time. So in the Bible, what we read in Genesis 6 is that the giants were in those days and also after that. And we see giants recorded before the flood, and we also see them recorded after the flood, and they have different names. Nephilim only shows up in the original Hebrew 3 times, and it's translated in the King James as giants, in Numbers 13 twice for the Anakim, and in Genesis 6 where it says giants. If you take that back to Hebrew, it says Nephilim. So the names that are showing up after the flood are names like the Rephaim, the Emim, the Abim, the Ozim, the Anakim, Horim, Amalekite, and on and on and on and on. So all of these giants show up after the flood, but they don't tell us, the Bible does not tell us how they show up. We only know that it said that they were before and after, and then they show up. And also according to the flood, just so that the audience understands I'm not ignoring this, is that according to the Genesis account, everything on earth is destroyed in the flood. So how does this happen? Biblically, the best way for me to account for it is there is a second incursion, what I call it, after the flood that either happens at Sodom and sometime before Babel in terms of timing. So Sodom is one of the first cities that is formed after the flood. And we get an account out of the Gnostic Gospels of these giants being started at Sodom and Gomorrah as a replanting of this flower after the flood. So I would say that for biblically would be how my best way of doing it. My fallback position is that these Nephilim are not described in the Table of Nations in the Bible. They just show up out of nowhere. So they don't descend from the descendants of Noah. So we don't know how they're created, or that leads you to the understanding is, did they survive the flood? Because there's also some tribes like the Kenites and the Kenizzites and 4 or 5 other tribes that show up after the flood of either humans or hybrids that don't go back to the Table of Nations and the sons of Noah as well. So there are other people that show up that are unaccounted for in the Bible. So that means perhaps some of them did survive the flood. And biblically, if you want to go legally on that, in Genesis 6 and Genesis 7, God is saying he's going to destroy everything he created. Well, it's the fallen angels who create the Nephilim. So again, it goes on in Genesis 6. And also note that Genesis 6 is part of the flood narrative. So this isn't 2 different narratives. So the giants being created and the flood is all part of the same story. Now, if you go to other accounts, which is my second version, is somehow on an ark or off-world or in the earth or somehow with the help of the fallen angels, because you get an account, and the best account of another ark would come out of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, Gilgamesh is a being that is, we understand, is created after the flood, and he is 2/3 God and 1/3 human. And the person who's telling the stories and his friend is Enkidu, who is also 2/3 God, 1/3 human. So these are archetypical giants. And we also, just as an anecdote, out of the Dead Sea Scrolls on 4Q531 through 534, you get accounts of the name of Gilgamesh before the flood out of the Book of Giants. But we don't know whether that's the same Gilgamesh or this new one just takes that name, which is sort of common. You have people taking names of giants before the flood that live after the flood. So that's not unusual. So he could be created after the flood or not. But who they talk about is Utnapishtim. And some people will know that as Ziusudra, depending which translation you're using. And this is the Ark story. This is the flood story of the Sumerians and the Mesopotamians. But Utnapishtim is also the archetypical Anunnaki or Nephilim. He's 2/3 God and 1/3 human, just like the whole family that he takes with him. So when you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, on the macro level, it's telling the same story. But on the micro level, as you get into the details, they're completely different. And you have a survival story on an ark of the Nephilim, and you have a survival story in Genesis of the human story, survival with Noah. And that's not an unusual sort of understanding. So if you go over to Greek mythology, just to give one more example, is you have Deucalion and Pyrrha. And they are the two survivors of the flood on an ark, very similar to the Epic of Gilgamesh. But the thing is that Deucalion is the son of Prometheus, who's a Titan, either a Titan Nephilim or a Titan god at that second tier of gods that I mentioned a little earlier. So whichever the case is, this is another Nephilim survival story. So I kind of look at it as my second fallback position is on an ark, because it seems to be telling a parallel account of the same disaster. And if you look, it doesn't matter whether or not it's a Native American, doesn't matter whether you go to Central America, South America, all around the world, all continents, all cultures, all religions have mythologies and religious accounts of giants being created who destroy the world. A flood comes and some of them survive, along with some humans also survive in a separate story. So it seems to me that that would be, just judging by the volume of evidence around the world, that would be my second position. Other people suggest that somehow some of the members on the ark were giants, or they had the DNA of giants that started the giants afterwards, but it doesn't make any sense. What happens is with the Canaanites who they're talking about, they actually go intermarry in with the Rephaim and the Anakim and produce the hybrid giants like the Amorites. So I recognize that as a possibility, but that's my third choice. And in the middle there, there's a story of people surviving in some of the mythoses within the earth or in spaceships off the earth. That's all, I suppose, possible with angelic help as well. But I lean more towards the ark.
Gary, I got a question about Machu Picchu. Some have said that it's possible that giants helped create the landscape of Machu Picchu because of the floods. Would you know anything about that?
Well, there's certainly speculation to that. And, the technology at Machu Picchu is way beyond what we can even do today. Don't care what anybody says. We can't do it today. And so it just tells you the level of technology at some time in the past that was actually there and how powerful the development of these sciences actually were. Now, there are some people that say that it's the giants who built all of the ancient monuments. But prehistory tells us two different phases. One is the gods create the first major cities at somewhere around 10,000 BC, whether or not it's Jericho or Uruk or any of the cities around the world. And that may include Machu Picchu, and that they brought in the humans when they started to civilize them and teach them into these cities to work for them and to worship them. And then there's a second level of building that goes on after, with the development of the humans and then developing of the sciences and being helped with by the fallen angels to take this knowledge with additional illicit knowledge to a whole new level. So Machu Picchu, I don't know how far back that gets dated, but the accuracy of what that's being built at, that would almost seem like that would be a godlike structure that's being built. But I do not dismiss what the Freemasons talk about Enoch and the different worlds, and they credit Enoch with building the pyramids, or at least supplying the knowledge to do that. And in the employment of building it, that they used some Nephilim, and perhaps there were some Nephilim being employed, but that's more after, like at Babel, it seems to be a little bit more realistic that they would be employed there, because you have to understand that before the flood, the kings of the earth, when this building was going on, were the giants. So why would they do the building? They would use their slaves to do that, right? Now, they may have had some giants enslaved to do it, but typically they were all running their own realms.
I got you. Mark has a quick question before we go to our next break. And Joe Roop in the Spreaker chat has a question. We'll get to that definitely after the break, maybe even get him in a phone call or so. But go ahead, Mark. Ask your question to Gary.
Okay. Gary, your book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, contrasts with some of the anthropological books. Is there a way where you can reconcile Goliath and the biblical Og's bed and the biblical giants with the books like Dr. Webb's The Dover Mound that mentions a giant found in northern Kentucky? That's just more just straight out archaeological science reporting. Is there a way that you feel that these two disciplines need to be reconciled, or are we just really just talking about the same people?
I think they are the same people, and most of the excavations in North America of these giants are, not as tall as like the ones in Goliath is, but there are diggings of ones that are 10, 11, 12 feet. So not all of them are at the 7 to 9 feet sort of level. But sort of the connection gets to be these are sort of red-haired skulls that, are being pulled out of these giants in North America. And what's interesting about that is from the Middle East, in terms of the two types of giants that seem to be the most common, there were two varieties. One had blonde hair and blue eyes, and the other one had red hair and hazel eyes. And sort of how that mythology goes is that these are the two off and on. One moves up to Germany, Russia, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and the red-haired, hazel-eyed ones move over to Ireland. But as they're being pushed out of the Middle East by the humans over time, even though they're going to maintain control of the kingships, sort of the rogue giants are being run out of the Middle East, and they migrate. They migrate to Europe. They probably migrate across the ocean. So I think when we see these red-haired skeletons being dug up in archaeology, and they're of more recent history, I think those are the descendants of these giants that fled the Middle East.
Interesting stuff. Okay, Gary, we have under 2 minutes. I don't think we have Joe. Joe probably call in second hour. Gary, do you want to tell us how to get your book or get in touch with you if people have questions after the show?
Sure. And if somebody does get a hold of me with a question or a comment that I feel I can add something to, I will get back to you. I'm very good at doing that. You can get a hold of me through my website, through the email there. That's at the Genesis6conspiracy.com, Genesis 6 with the number 6 conspiracy.com. I also have a generous excerpt on all 98 chapters, so you can get a good flavor for the book. And if you're interested in buying a signed copy, you can go there or link to Barnes & Noble and Amazon to purchase there as well. You can also follow me or ask me questions on Facebook under Gary Wayne, and I have a couple Genesis 6 conspiracies. And you can also follow me or comment or ask me questions on Twitter at Gary Wayne63, at Gary Wayne63. And my book is available through all online bookstores, Amazon, as I mentioned, .ca, .uk, .com around the world, BarnesandNoble.com, and through bookstores, but you'll have to order it in, likely distributed through Bookmasters.
Very good. All right. All right, everyone, we're going to take our second break right now, and we are speaking with Genesis 6 Conspiracy, Mr. Gary Wayne, and Mark Eddy. I'm Dave Cruz. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Okay. This is Beyond Strange. I am your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. And remember, you can follow the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Spreaker, all under Beyond the Strange. We're on Twitter at Strange Days 2015, trending with the hashtag Beyond the Strange. Follow us on Instagram as well. And you can always listen to the program live every Sunday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you missed a show, you can go to Apple iTunes. It's free. And download the show from there. And always go to beyondthestrange.com for all your info, links, and information that you might have missed. And it's a good site to go to. Just check it out, and it's all good. I want to thank Gary one more time, Mr. Gary Wayne, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and Mark Eddy for being with me tonight. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
A lot of fun. Glad to be here. Glad you invited me.
Me too, man. And, it's funny because I always learn something new about giants, and I think it's an important topic because a lot of people still come across these subjects in different parts of the world. One of the interesting articles I saw recently, and I think they talked about it maybe on Coast to Coast, was that there might have been a giant sighting in Afghanistan. I can't remember how long ago this was, but do you remember anything about that, Gary?
Yeah, I actually listened to that. It's a riveting interview, and Steve Quayle, I believe, as my memory recalls, has a pilot on there who was witnessing it, and he is describing it. And one of the things I was happy to hear is a lot of the details in terms of the size and the smell and the strength and the dexterity of this monster that they were trying to kill matches up very much with what my research found. So either it was a very well detailed and researched hoax, or it's an accurate account, and everybody has to make their own sort of descriptions on it. But again, it had red hair, and it killed a lot of soldiers because it had the ability to move quickly and to throw things and rip people apart, and it was just a monstrous sort of being. And they estimated the weight at being somewhere between 12 and 1,500 pounds, as I understand. This is a monster, right? Yeah. Right. And if it's true, and the details provided were very, very good, whether or not it was from an army perspective and tactical perspective or a giant perspective. So, yeah, it was riveting. I suggest people look for it on it, and it's readily available if you just sort of Google that on the internet. Yeah, and they have sort of a rendering, if you will. It's not really a picture; it's more like a sketch. And they have this sketch of the squadron all standing around this blue-skinned giant with red hair, and it might have even had the extra digits on the hands and toes. I don't recall, but
it's a very interesting looking beast, if you will. It's blue skin. Is that something that's typically found with giants?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, I haven't seen the skin, and I haven't seen any descriptions of a blue-colored skin. So I don't know whether or not it was because most of the descriptions of the Nephilim, at least in the west and the northern hemispheres, are of a very, very pale white skin. Lots of hair, but very, very pale. So the blue could be just that it was dead, right? And it but I've not heard the blue color in that account, but I'm not discounting that either.
Yeah, that's a good point. It could have been dead, blue from being dead or something like that. That's true.
Yeah.
I am waiting for my my buddy and my partner here, Joe Roop, to call in. I'm not sure if he might be on now. We'll see in a second, but he has a pretty good question, and you'll be very impressed with his questioning. But I do got a quick question from Twitter, and it does come from Deb Russo Matt, who's in there, and a couple of quick questions, as a matter of fact. You might have already talked about how big giants were, but I think she missed it. Can you give us approximate size and dimensions of these giants?
Yes, the original ones are said to be 20 to 40 feet tall by most people's accounts. Maybe they were bigger, but that's sort of where the consensus is. And Amos has a reference to the Amorites, that they were as large as the cedars of Lebanon, and cedars of Lebanon are the giant trees that they used to build all of the ancient structures out of when they needed these huge wood beams. They grew from 36 to about 50 feet. We don't get anything like that biblically that they were that tall, and I don't have any historical annotations that I found that I could ascribe to that after the flood. But understand, there's two different sets, one before and after the flood. Out of secular history, we have accounts of them, being 11 and 12 feet tall. About the tallest that I could get out of secular history, 11 foot 3 inches, recorded by Passio and Secondilia, and lots of 10-foot ones.
Okay, and then another question from Deb is, it's actually a rainbow question, and it has to do with the flood, and it has to do with promises. And was that more of a metaphor type of symbology, or what can you tell us about the rainbow in the Bible?
Well, it's used as a sign of the covenant to Noah, that God promises never to destroy the world again via water. And even in the end time, whether or not it's from other religions around the world or it's out of the Bible, the destruction is going to come by fire this time, not by water. So typically that's what it's used for. It now, it does branch off in mythology and other understandings to a whole bunch of different things, but out of the Bible, that's the message.
Okay, and last question from Deb Russo Matt in the Twitterverse. It has to do with tithing. What can you tell us about tithing?
Well, it's tithing really is about a 10% offering to God, and it was part of all whether your income or what you grew or what you produced, that you would give 10% of everything to God. And it was part of the covenant that was created, that was passed down in incorporating the Noah covenant that we just talked about, to the nation of Israel when they were formed at the time of Moses and the Exodus. And become a nation. And so all, 10% of everything they produced was to go to God and the priesthood to help them live and to do good works and to sacrifice, to do their sacrifices for God. And so we need to understand that in the context of Old Testament law, that Israel was a nation of priests, set aside to be a nation of priests for God. And so if you're part of the Christian ideology, you're freed from the law. And James only laid down essentially, 3 laws other than our faith that we needed to follow as a minimum. But there's a good case also to be made that if you have the Spirit in you, you will be led to fulfill the law. So there's nothing wrong with either tithing or not tithing, but it needs to be what you want to do. But it's an interesting concept that still resonates today. That's for sure.
Right. Thank you very much for answering that, by the way, Gary. And Mark, I know you have a quick question you want to ask Gary. I'm still waiting for Joe to pop up on Skype and let me know if he's ready to speak with Gary. So why don't you go ahead and ask your question to Gary?
Okay. Cassie, one of my students, is listening, so I have to sound scholarly for her. But Gary, when I was like 12 or 13, it's like the Omen 2 movies were just coming out on HBO when that was just getting started in the late 70s or so. But I remember it's like you see these passages in movies like that, and you go and look it up in the Bible. It's like, oh, there it is. Those movies really aren't that made up. And in your book, you have a lot of information in there from the Old and New Testament, and you ask us to look at the Book of Wisdom. You don't hear that one quoted very much. You have the Book of Daniel and the prophecies mentioned. Throughout your book. I think one of the really intriguing aspects of the Genesis 6 conspiracy is that you get us looking back to the Bible for the history of the early stages of human history, like you did in the Book of Wisdom. Daniel's looking at a lot of prophecy, as well as the Book of Revelation. Do you find that all of that information is coming true?
Oh, I think so. And what I would preface that with as well is that if you want to understand what is going on today with the secret societies and the New World Order, and what they're planning is you need to go back into history and prehistory and learn what happened before. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen in the future has happened before, and they've tried to bring it about many times. And by going through prehistory, you're going to understand the language that they're talking in and what that means. And so if you want to understand how the Antichrist is going to come about, you need to understand that these Nephilim bloodlines that I was talking about, whether or not it turns out to be the actual Antichrist or not, they are trying to present the world with their Messiah that descends back to the bloodlines of the Nephilim and the fallen angels. And that when you see those movies, as you mentioned, with Damien, which is an interesting name in itself on the play on words, as in demon, you have guardians that are looking after this Antichrist type figure that is trying to rise to power. And this is not an unusual concept in the secret societies. In fact, they write that they keep 3 Antichrist figures mentored from birth on hand all of the time, waiting for the opportunity to put their Antichrist on the world throne. They would love to do it before the ordained time, but they will accept the ordained time if that's all that's available to them, and that it will be. And so what they tend to do as well is they tell us what they're going to do before they do it. And it seems to be, again, another one of those interesting sort of obligations that they seem to have, that they have to forewarn how they're going to deceive us. But this is exactly what they're trying to do, and they take their genealogies through the royal families and very powerful families that are maybe not on a throne today, but are royal bloodlines and are the pure bloods, or at least as pure as they've been able to keep them. And they take those genealogies and have records thereof to take them right back into prehistory.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
you do mention these guardians. That was really intriguing. But I know, Joe, you
Yes. Wanted to just introduce Joe Roop, who's joined us in the Skype. Joe, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, what's up, guys?
How
Hi,
you doing,
Joe.
brother? Do you have a question? You do have a question for Gary. What am I talking about? I'm still sick, man.
That's cool. My main question is that do you believe that the Gnostic texts, like the Nag Hammadi library, especially the Sethian texts, hold water? Because when I read them, they don't interpret at all like other theological books. It's almost like plain English. It doesn't even look the same.
Yeah, I mean the Sethian books. I mean, and the Nag Hammadi has a lot of different books, and there's a lot of different Gnostic texts out there. I think these are quite well written books, but also understand though that the Gnostics, what they're doing at the time of, say, around 200 BC to 200 or 300 years into the Common Era, they are collecting writings from around the world, and they're creating a whole new cosmology that I like to call global Gnosticism. And so they write a lot of different books. Not all of them are consistent with each other, but directionally they're all quite similar. And, what's interesting about the Sethian books, and I don't know whether you're familiar with Amaka Seth, but he is another race of giants recorded by the Gnostics, who they would look at as sort of being the father of the Gnostic race, as they like to call themselves, and that it is this divine spark, or this DNA, or this bloodline from Amaka Seth that they like to call is the 1,000 points of light that they're trying to bring back together in the end time, or the new age, and vibrate in a harmonic conversion with the universal government and religion to evolve into godhood. And Amaka Seth is not created in sort of the same way as some of the other giant races are created. And he's also saved within a cloud from the flood, just as he's created in a cloud in the Amaka Seth accounts in the Gnostic scriptures. So they have some very, very interesting accounts, and as I said, they're not always consistent, but they are telling parallel accounts in a lot of cases, what I think might be their history from both before and after the flood.
Good enough for me.
I was wondering what happened there. Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
Well, the Gnostic texts are confusing to me because there's a lot of different, just like you said, there's a lot of different texts from a lot of different sources. Some say that Yahweh was actually the evil guy, and they quote Jesus. It's like they got a whole nother story for Jesus.
Well, they
the
do.
One that we're used to,
They do, and you need to understand that the religion of the secret societies is Gnosticism. So if you want to understand more about secret societies, right? Okay, so, and in the Gnosticism and in the polytheist religions, you have this dualism, good versus evil. So in that religion, you have them bringing the omnipotent God down, that's recorded in the Bible, down to the same level and power as Satan is, or Hell as it transfers out of Hebrew in Isaiah 14:12. They like to call him Lucifer, but that's a Latin word. It doesn't belong there. No other translation other than the King James Bible will use Lucifer. And so this is this constant sort of struggle that's always in balance, that they're trying to win this realm is basically the thrust of what they're trying to do with bringing on the New Age and the end time. And what people don't understand is that, you know, these secret societies, they want to bring on this rendezvous with destiny. They want to bring about the end time. They want to have this showdown with God because they believe they can win. That's because they believe that God isn't this omnipotent God of the universe. He's just one of other archons or angels, as they like to say, that became arrogant and said there was none besides them, and isn't even considered in Gnosticism one of the primordial creator gods. And as I recall in Gnosticism, and I'd have to check the book, but I'm not going to try and name it off the top of my head, but Sophia is the one who creates the marriage.
Yeah, you're right
they
on.
call the god of, yeah.
The world rulers, I mean, even in the second treatise of Seth, when he talks about a voice of the ruler came to the angels, and he quotes like, "I am God, and there is no other but me." And he said, "But I laughed joyfully when I examined his conceit." You know, so yeah, I mean, you're spot on. It gets confusing though. You got to look at both sides of the coin, I think.
Yeah, and so whether or not it's Demirage or it is Adonai. And Adonai is Adonis out of the Middle East area as a god. That's the god that, or the angel that the Freemasons would equate with the God of the Bible. And
Adonai.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, I'm done.
You're done. I always like bringing Joe on, man. He's got great questions of Gnosticism and all different topics of mystery schools and all that. So it's always great to have Joe on the show, man. Thanks for coming on, man. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Joe. Hey, Gary, let's take a little detour from the Giants, and I think your response, would tie into a recent show Dave and I did with Varla Ventura, but your book also touches on fairies and little people.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's not all about giants. It's these other people or creatures from mythology, and we do have examples of little people in the archaeological literature. Dr. Webb mentions a couple being found in Kentucky. So Gary, how did the little people fit into the Genesis 6 conspiracy?
Well, just as I think it was Tolkien who wrote that, just as, there's prehistory and all this different information that comes out of prehistory, there are also the elves, and he truly believed that. Well, this idea of fairies is a constitutive understanding in terms of how other organizations and religions around the world view things. And so that I don't lose the listener here, let me just first of all say there are 4 categories of fairies. You've got the opalescent fairies. These are the ones that either came from planets or from other dimensions, and they're what we would know typically as a god or a fallen angel. And they're led by the rebellious one, and they come from, as I said, another area, and they produce through human females, the earthborn fairies, and these are the shining ones, just as the Anunnaki are called the shining ones. And in this case, typically you get most of this shining being out of the Tuatha De Danann, because they were the fairy people. And the Tuatha De Danann also take their, as I mentioned earlier in their show, their migration back to the Middle East, and Scythia in particularly, where that belief system believes Tartarus was located, and in and around Transylvania and that whole area. And that's where they escaped out of it. And if people remember in Greek mythology, the rebellious Titans were sentenced to Tartarus. And so they're thought to escape after the flood out of there in that sort of understanding. So these are the earthborn fairies, the giants, the Tuatha De Danann. And they're very much connected to, as I said, the giants in the Middle East. Then you have the third kind, which are like banshees and ghosts and demons and phantoms. These are the bodiless spirits of the earthborn fairies. And or the bodiless spirits of the Nephilim, because they were given the immortal spirit that I mentioned earlier in the show, but God steps in Genesis 6 and limits all life to 120 years going forward. But the original generation has these immortal spirits that were passed on from the gods or the fallen angels, depending on which religious or mythological perspective you're going to come from. But the bodies die, but the spirit doesn't. And the spirit's not permitted to go to sleep. And it's not allowed to go to heaven. So it wanders the earth. And they thirst for bodies, just as Jesus talks about in the four Gospels, to possess a body. The fourth class are the elementals. And the elementals are divided into three categories. And these are the little people. So you have the ugly ones that are like gnomes and dwarves and goblins and creatures like that. And there's many different kinds under each subcategory. And in these three categories, that's a common splitting up, whether it's in North America with native legends or around the world, of these little people into three different groups. Then you have the good-looking ones. So you have some good-looking elves, like you see in Tolkien, and you also have like a Tinkerbell and Peter Pan. These are good-looking little ones, and many subcategories in there. And then you also have the mischievous ones. So you have ones like, the leprechauns, for example, and are much associated with the rainbow, because this is about before the flood, and the treasure at the end of the rainbow is this lost knowledge that comes from the antediluvian epoch, known also as the pearls of wisdom and the golden fleece and the hall of records and the golden apples and the tables of the destiny and the emerald tablet and the Shatia, and on and on and on and on with all these different mythologies. It's not money, it's actually knowledge that is at the end of that rainbow. And what's interesting about this fairy mythology is it also links into the alien mythology, particularly with one category in the ugly ones in the gnome classification. And gnomes are also the ones that would work with the wizards in prehistory to keep the knowledge and protect the knowledge and keep the genealogies. All of the little people had specific roles, just as dwarves would make weapons and things for people. And that's why when you see elves making things with Santa, which is just another fairy story, they have these skills and they produce things for the gods. But within the ugly classification, you have this one group that has flying machines. It comes through portals and has great technology, kidnaps people, does experimentation on them, and then returns them after a fortnight. And they come through, as I say, these portals or these fairy dolmens, and dolmen just means portals or shays, and fairy mounds are known by different names for these portals that are around the world. And the people don't remember anything after being kidnapped. And I put one of these examples in my book just as an example, because if you didn't know it was a fairy abduction, you would swear it was a gray alien abduction. And they're also called the Greys, the gray fairies, the gray neighbors, gray something or other. And I think this whole ideology of the aliens as being around since prehistory is likely true based on the technology that was developed in the antediluvian epoch, just as reptilians are another order of some of those species.
Gentlemen, thank you for that explanation, Gary. I'm so sorry we missed the mark on the commercial, so we're going to do that right now. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Everyone, this is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you all for being here tonight in this fascinating topic. It's been a wonderful evening with Gary and Mark, and it's just been really great. I mean, the time is just flying right by, and just remind everyone that tomorrow night Mark and I will be on Project Compass, and we have David Brody with us, and we're going to be speaking about Atlantis and all kinds of different things. It's going to be another fascinating evening. So you don't want to miss that right here on the Fringe FM, and that will be at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. And so don't miss that. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful evening tomorrow night as well. But tonight we want to get back to Genesis 6 Conspiracy. We are speaking with Gary Wayne and Mr. Mark Eddy. Thank you, gentlemen, again for being on the show.
Yeah, and Gary, you wanted to wrap up with what are the allegories of the fairies?
Yes.
Yes. And it's important to understand the physical aspect and the genealogies and how that sort of plays in with secret societies and the descendants of giants and the religions, but also you need to understand the allegorical side, just as the Gnostics believe in the Elven bloodline of the Shining Ones, which is the Tuatha Dé Danann that go back to the Middle East through Scythia. And part of that whole sort of Gnostic religion, understand that there are four main sort of allegories to these bloodlines. And from that matriarchal side, you have fairies and owls. And these are the allegories they use to associate with the matriarchal following of these genealogies throughout history. So when you have a fairy queen, as in Guinevere, for example, and out of King Arthur in that story. I mean, what they're doing is, through their literature, is they're chronologically laying out their legacy and their history of the bloodlines of these and the descendants of the Nephilim from the matriarchal side. They use similar allegories for the patriarchal or the male side, and that will come through dragon and through ravens. And that's why you see those four allegories used over and over and over worldwide. And there's no coincidence why you then have, sorry to interject, why you have vampire tales being related to, Dracula, because, Dracula is, Dracul is a dragon, and you put the A on, that means the son of a dragon. And so when you're talking about blood drinking, that's a Nephilim sin of the antediluvian epoch, as they slaughtered humans and ate humans, and they used to drink blood to advance their cognitive abilities and trying to extend their life. And those teeth on the vampire is the cobra, which is back to the serpent imagery, and you get the cobra imagery coming through the Egyptian Nephilim kings of pharaohs, just as you have the same thing going through with the subcontinent of India, with the kingships descending down from the Nagas, who were also these serpent type of gods that produced these Nephilim serpent-like kings. And Naga goes back to the word cobra. And of course, that blood gives the vampire immortality. And of course, it's the mortal enemy of Christianity. So the allegories that they use are pervasive and everywhere, and they're commonplace. But what's hidden underneath, as with all fairy tales, as both Lewis and Tolkien will talk about, is the real meaning that the occultists understand.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and there's also all the serpent imagery from Central America, Mexico as well. It's just all over the world.
All the gods and all of the kings had serpent or dragon imagery, and as I mentioned earlier, is in antiquity, the dragon and the serpent were the same understood being, just as the crocodile was in some other, like the Egyptian mythology and religion, who was also named Draco, by the way.
There you go. Draco. Well, Gary, I got a quick question, really quick, before we, we still have 20 minutes before we end the show, but
yeah.
I want to.
Oh, and just in case somebody double checks, he's also called Sobek in some other counts. In case somebody questions, in there's Sobek and there's Draco.
Gotcha.
Yep.
What one of the titles, of course, of this show and of your material is Genesis 6 Conspiracy. What exactly is the conspiracy, and why is it important that people need to know this today? You do seem to say that the Nephilim is going to be returning. Is that correct?
Well, a lot of people think that, and I certainly hold that as a possibility that you could have another recreation of the Nephilim coming in the end time, whether it's through DNA manipulation or copulation, again, however it comes about, transhumanism, all sorts of different ways you could create a superhuman or the new man concept. But I think it's, from my point of view, it's more likely to come from the descendants of the Nephilim through the bloodlines in terms of how they're going to take over the world and split it into 10 empires. It's like the Atlantean Empire, which had more than just the island continent, has actually had 10 kings. And in the Atlantean mythology, you have Poseidon mating with Clymene, producing 10 Titan Nephilim kings to reign over it, which Atlas ruled over Atlantis, and what they're trying to do was create a world empire. Now, in Plato, he writes that the Athenians defeated it, but what they're trying to do is recreate the new Atlantis in the end time, which is also known as the New Age. So the whole understanding is that the first apocalypse by water is going to be like the apocalypse of the end time by fire, where we're going to see this come about again. But I think it's more or less through the 10 empires that they're trying to set up, through the secret societies and the descendants of these Nephilim who control the secret societies through the purebloods. Because if you get into the Rosicrucians, for example, you've got a split. About half of them, the top level, are purebloods. The other ones are highly initiated and probably some of the bloodlines, but they're not considered the ones that are going to answer or be representative of the actual families. And so what they're trying to do is create this 10-nation empire, and they created the Club of Rome in the late 60s and started to see some of their influence by the early 70s, who have split the world up into these 10 groups of nations or blocks of nations or trading blocks or spheres of influence, whatever you want to call it, to set up the New World Order. So they're working on it, and they're working on it with their own imagery, just as Francis Bacon wrote about this in his book, without coincidence, called The New Atlantis, where in the end time you would have the universal religion of the Rosicrucians, which is Gnosticism and polytheism, that's going to work in harmony with science and ruled over by the royal bloodlines, and into this sort of new age and utopian society.
Yeah, I'm waiting for something drastic to happen with the New World Order showing up. I mean, we got little hints here and there. I mean, you follow history, of course. You know that there's been civilizations that were definitely before us. You have Atlantis. You have other civilizations like God, I can't even think of the name off the top of my head. I'm still a little fuzzy, but it's.
You have Mu.
You got Mu, yeah.
You have Asgard. You have Lemuria. You have Sumeria. Depending on who you talk to, there was 4 to 9 ancient civilizations, and some people believe that Lemuria was the parent civilization that spawned the 7 ones that came afterwards.
And where I was going with that is, how much farther do we need to actually? I mean, is this a continuous thing that's going to keep happening? I mean, is the New World Order already here? Has it always been here?
Well, it's always been here, but not in total control, and it won't be. I mean, it certainly has tried over and over and over and over, and certainly at the time of Babel, that's why you have the dispersion of the people and the confusion of the languages, because the people were so few and the time wasn't right. But from a Christian perspective, where I come from, is that this can't happen, even though they're trying, until the restrainer is removed. And so we won't see it until the ordained time. So they keep marching it forward looks like they're getting close, and then things like Brexit happen, or Trump comes along, or all of these different sort of stumbling blocks that just when they think they're getting close, it sort of gets pushed back again. And I also think it's going to take some significant catastrophes and some significant revelations and things to be brought out before they can actually get over the hump.
Do you think that that a lot of this this devastation that we've witnessed, especially in 2017 with the hurricanes and some of the earthquakes and wildfires and a lot of these things that would seem natural are quite possibly man-made to create a distraction or something, if you will?
I think probably both. What they certainly don't want to do is give it sort of any biblical sort of elevation to it, because if you understand prophecy, you know we're going to have more earthquakes, we're going to have more hurricanes, we're going to have natural disasters, right? Those are the birth pangs, and they're going to get ever more intense as we get closer. But I also think there's contrived things going on. And they're going to do everything to lead people to the reasons why it's happening, which is going to actually help them to try and bring about the New World Order, because they bring everything back to this old sort of thing as well. If we don't stop consuming, we're going to pollute ourselves and destroy ourselves from the face of the earth. If we don't stop consuming and using vehicles and airplanes, then we're going to have an apocalyptic greenhouse effect, or we're going to destroy ourselves from the face of the earth through nuclear. And all of these things are designed to transcend borders. And the whole idea is to bring about the Babel syndrome. Everybody under one language, one religion, one government, so they can have this new age and this harmonic conversion, and to fight for their freedom from who they call the oppressive God of the universe, the God of the Bible.
Gotcha. Mark, was there anything you wanted to bring up before we wrap things up?
Yeah, Gary, you do have a section on the end times or second coming of Jesus. We were just talking about the New World Order. What are we supposed to be looking for as what like the New World Order comes to an end? That kind of thing. What should we be looking for in our leaders?
In terms of that they're taking us in this direction? Is that what you're asking?
You have information in there about the deception of the
right.
Antichrist will be an avatar, have a name Abaddon.
Abaddon. You're talking about Abaddon.
Yeah. Describe what the end time is going to be like.
Well, it's going to be a world turned upside down and inside out, and we're being prepared for that as we go forward. But you're going to have not only these birth pangs that I was talking about, but you're going to have a rise of a religion that's going to consume the whole earth, and it's going to be, I think, the Gnostic religion, and typically called Babel because that's where it goes back to, which is the Babylon of end time prophecy. But it's going to take false prophets and a major false prophet to bring this about, and they're going to have to predict things that if we don't come together, God's going to destroy the earth, and we're going to become extinct. So you're going to have to come together to do this. So it's going to have to involve the de-deifying of Jesus down to prophet status, and destroying Christianity, but not completely, so that they can fold it into this new polytheist religion. And the secret societies and these Gnostic religions believe they have the evidence to prove that Jesus didn't die on the cross, but he did produce progeny. So expect that that's going to happen. And you're going to have this religion be the one that starts to bring the world together in combination with catastrophes to drive them together. And don't be surprised if there's a encounter where we find out we're not alone in the universe, because that always drives people together as well. But you're also going to have the abyss opened up, as you're referring to Abaddon or Apollyon, which a lot of people think that they're trying to do with CERN. I think they're doing more than one thing. You've got quantum computers there, and it's interdimensional, and the abyss is thought to be an interdimensional prison for these impassioned fallen angels. Abaddon, who leads these strange beings coming out of the abyss in Revelation 9, is also called Apollyon or Apollo. And this is also the same sort of god of the underworld that is equivalent to Azazel in the book of Enoch, and he was the leader of the Watchers. And the crime for violating the laws of creation in the antediluvian epoch, for having sex with human females to create demigods in the physical world, was they were punished by being locked in the abyss until the end time. So when I said there's a possibility they could come back and recreate giants in the end time, you've got these worst of the fallen angels being released and demons coming out with them as well, which are probably the worst of them. And expect that Abaddon is going to possess or avatar the Antichrist, because we understand that Antichrist is the one who once was, now is not, but is coming again and comes up out of the abyss. So this all happens in the end time. So there's going to be a new world order that's signed with a world peace agreement that's going to secure the safety of Israel as they sign on, and that's going to be done by Antichrist in partnership with the false religion. And Antichrist from that will rise to power with his fame and oratory abilities and be crowned at the 3.5 point of the last 7 years.
Amazing stuff. And man, I just want to give Gary one last opportunity to please tell us where we can find your material, your websites, your books, that sort of thing. Gary?
You can follow me on Facebook under Gary Wayne, and I try and put out a major posting that clarifies things, whether it's the double cross of Lorraine and Knights Templars and secret societies, and at least once a week. And I also post on to my Genesis 6 conspiracy pages. I also have a group where I post my interviews and do postings on called Gary Wayne, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And if you do ask me a question, I will get back to you. You can also follow me on Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63. And you can go to my website, Genesis6conspiracy.com, Genesis 6 with the number 6, conspiracy.com. You can get a hold of me through there, or you can link in to purchase my book for a signed copy, or to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or a Kindle copy.
Excellent. And I'm sorry, Mark, if you had anything else to add, we got a couple more minutes.
Gary's book is excellent, very thorough, well researched, and like I said earlier, there are a lot of, like the Book of Wisdom. You don't hear a lot of people bringing that one up, but Gary does. There are passages in that I was like, oh. I need to check this out. So I got out my Bible, and there it is. Getting a little bit of like antediluvian information. I completely forgot about that. That's one of the nice things about Gary's book. Get you going back to the Bible, look up those prophecies, come up with your own conclusions.
I have over 120 pages of endnotes, and so I try and measure everything against the Bible, but there's a lot of other resources. So if you're into Atlantis or if you're into secret societies, I annotate my sources, and people can go check it up and read more on that, or check the veracity of what I'm saying.
Are you working on another book, or
I am working on another book, and certainly my publisher would like me to do another one that's like the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, but I'm Thinking more, well, I've started it. I'm a couple hundred pages in, and it's more on prophecy for the end time.
That's a fascinating subject. And the Book of Revelation is, it seems like it's you don't know a whole lot about the Bible. Most people are just, what they do seem to know is a lot of the nightmarish images from the Book of Revelation, and it is just a fascinating book. There are all kinds of opinions on it. Are you using like the like Barclay Bible studies books?
I'm not familiar with what they have in those books. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm a contrarian. I don't rely on other people's research.
Okay. The images of all the hybrid type goats and nightmarish creatures is intriguing, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what you have to say, how you interpret all those, the different horns on the goats and sheep and things like that. Or are they really all these different?
I think that'd be great for Gary to answer that and many other questions when he comes on Project Compass with us.
Okay, well, I hope that you'll be on the Monday night show with us. We're looking for a time to fit you in, and I'm sure you will attract lots of listeners. I think you made a big splash tonight.
Awesome.
I'd love to join you on your other show.
Wonderful evening, Gary. Thank you again, Gary Wayne, everyone. Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Definitely check that out. Check out his websites. I'll put up some links on my webpage at beyondthestrange.com. Thank you again, Gary, for being here tonight. Also, thank you, Mark. And I just want to remind everyone, executive producer and creator of Beyond the Strange is Dave Cruz. Co-executive producer of Beyond the Strange is Deb J. Cruz. Show graphics is by Demix. Music is by Alan Hall. Zebrafish. Visit soundcloud.com/Zebrafish. Beginning disclaimer is by Casper Parks. Thanks to everyone reposting in Twitter and Spreaker chat. Tell your friends about Beyond the Strange. Tonight's broadcast of Beyond the Strange is owned and copyrighted by Dave Cruz. Cannot be simulcast, broadcasted, or copied without written consent of Beyond the Strange. Also, the views and opinions are not necessarily that of Beyond the Strange, hosts, guests, and affiliated networks. Listeners are encouraged to conduct research and formulate their own opinions. Everyone, thank you so much for being here tonight. Don't forget, next week, same time, same place, we're going to have Xavier Hayes. You don't want to miss that. Until then, everyone, stay safe, be happy, and stay strange. Hasta, everyone.